Okay, so welcome to Sisterhood Smarts. Today we will be discussing human trafficking with our smart guests, Cassiopeia and Brittany. And
Hi.
hey, ladies. And they're going to be talking about this very pervasive issue that affects millions, if not billions, of individuals across the world. And so, this is why we believe that it's a very important conversation and one that is constantly evolving, changing, because remember, the traffickers are not asleep as well. So it's constantly changing and transforming. So I want to welcome Cassiopeia and Brittany back to Sisterhood Smarts. How are you ladies doing?
Good. We're doing good. It's early here, so we're just starting our day.
Yeah, it's afternoon over here, so it's all good. Okay, so I think just to lay the foundation and to provide some context, I'd like you both to kind of just briefly, I know we could take a whole show talking about your background, but briefly share your background and how you became involved in the fight against human trafficking.
You want to go first or me?
Well, mine's kind of been throughout my entire life. I've always had people come to me with their stories. Not that I knew it was trafficking back then when I was a kid, not even throughout my teenage years. I didn't find out that I was even trafficked myself until about, 4 or 5 years ago in my 20s.
Yeah, gosh. How old were you even when you heard the words human trafficking? To use to describe what we're even talking about. I wasn't familiar with those words at all.
Probably about 20, but it wasn't until like 21, 22 when I had figured out that I'd actually been trafficked myself. But I had always had people that came to me with their stories. Like I had someone when I was in, I think, 6th grade, so I was pretty little, maybe like, I don't know, how old are you in 6th grade, like 10?
Yeah.
I think. And they came to me with their entire CPS file because they were adopted, but they weren't in a really good situation and they were separated from all of their siblings. And they shared their story with me then. So it kind of always stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of my background, everything I studied was in child development. So.
And all that helped me, when you're figuring out that you were involved in it. All of those memories from back then are what helped us all remember and see it and see, wow, that's human trafficking. I don't think any of us had the words. We knew we were in terrible childhoods or bad situations where we had been abused or neglected, or in some way I think the world all knew those words, but they didn't know human trafficking until that had been defined enough. And then people are finding they were victims when they didn't know they were. I was born in it and survived it and didn't know the terminology. I was heavily abused and used in rituals for 16 years, but I was never given those words. And it wasn't until after I met Brittany and we were together at a work training. We were both counselors at a group home, and we were together at a work training when they were discussing human trafficking, and we kind of looked at each other like, wow, that's a word that they're describing everything we've lived through. But we were seeing it as a spectrum for the first time. And we were seeing that the spectrum was wider than we ever thought. My background as a child and the things I went through were extremely different and unique compared to the things that Brittany went through, but they were both human trafficking. And so we both began to tie it together there. And then years later, when our awareness had grown and our babies were a little bigger, we decided to follow a map and go back to where I had been sold when I was a child so I could get some closure. We weren't searching for much else, and we found that it was still happening. And that's how we ended up coming forward public. And it has grown exponentially, our awareness of the depth.
The routes.
Oh, the routes. Mm-hmm. The routes are so many that we've watched so many of your podcasts and the people that you have had on discussing the routes, and they're so correct. and they discuss it beautiful, and they list 20 different routes, and it still doesn't even scratch the surface.
No, it
For
doesn't.
the amount of different, unique, individual routes of entering into human trafficking or keeping someone in it. And so it becomes this entangled web of things that are hard to talk about because there's so many. I don't know if we'd ever be able to get out all of the routes. And every time we all think we have, they come up with new ones. So, as our days go on, we learn more because it's evolving and it's strange. We're all trying to stop it, I think, before it evolves any further. We both got in it because we survived it. And I think that's how most people that are working to end it now found themselves in it, was when they found that they had lived through it. They didn't want that to continue. We didn't either. We definitely, though, did not know what we were doing. We get asked that a lot. How did you know how to work to end this? We did not. We didn't. We just had to put together all of our skills and do absolutely everything we are and can. People called and we helped in every way we could. They screamed for help and we just answered and did whatever it was that we could do. And if we couldn't do it, we found a way to find someone who could. That's what we've been doing the whole time.
Yeah, and you actually highlight a very key point as to why it's very difficult to end human trafficking. People just don't know. So if you don't know what the problem is, you cannot solve a problem you don't know exists.
Exactly.
Yeah, you've really highlighted one of the root causes or reasons why it's so hard to fight human trafficking. I for lack of better words, I would say there is illiteracy in the topic. There is lack of knowledge as to what it looks like, and there are so many misconceptions and myths. And I know the media, the movies have a lot to do with this because of how they paint the picture of how also a prostitute and a pimp in the, then they go into a truck.
Yeah.
It's not. That's why people don't know how to identify human trafficking. So perhaps you can talk about some of the misconceptions that are associated or attached to human trafficking.
Let me start with why. I want to add to what you're talking about, why it's so hard to work to end it and why it's so hard to see it for what it actually is. We have rescues here on our property. Brittany and I have been a search and rescue team by ourselves for a little over 2 years. And there have been occasions where we have brought rescues back here. They had nowhere else to go. And we try to work with them to teach them to recognize human trafficking and all of the routes for themselves so that they will be safe if they ever leave here. And in doing that, we got intimately aware of how difficult that is to teach someone to be able to see or recognize the routes or what it looks like. And the reason that is because human trafficking, all of it, every route, the entire thing encompassed in one problem, is so much more than anyone is aware that it is. It is the largest ritual that's ever been attempted. And by ritual, we need to look at what that means. The word ritual in itself is a pattern that repeats, specific, without change. So just like any tradition or holiday that falls on the same day every year, it doesn't change. Human trafficking as a whole is the largest ritual that's ever been attempted. And in a ritual of any kind, all of the ones I survived as a child, all of the ones we have had to undo in our work, all of the ones we have heard about and counseled people through because they survived, there is one common factor. The details of a ritual are designed to be so magnetically and energetically and emotionally and psychologically sticky, for lack of a better term. They are so sticky that people, even with the best heart, the highest awareness, and the best intention, get stuck in the details. So as we all describe the routes of human trafficking, those in the ritual of human trafficking are the details. Those are parts of the details. If we're describing a ritual, okay, a satanic ritual that I lived through as a child, I could tell you the purpose of the ritual or what they were intending to do by using me in it. And I could safely do that without you becoming stuck in the details, and you'd be able to hear my words. You'd be able to understand what their goal was. But if I described that exact same ritual to you, and I didn't bullet point it and only tell you what the purpose was and what their intention was, and maybe a few things they did to attain that goal, if I talked about any visual details, what it looked like in the room, who was there, how they did it, if I even mentioned what time it was, how many hours it took, those details alone would get people stuck for days, months, or years. If I mentioned the names of the individuals involved, no one would hear the purpose, the goal, or what these people were trying to achieve. They would only hear the names of these famous or well-known people. Mm-hmm. And then they are stuck in that detail for a long time. And from being stuck in the detail of, say, the names of elite people, they end up stuck in a rabbit hole. And that one takes them to another one and another one. So now they're stuck on the names of these elite people, and maybe they start searching for information about these elite people, and they find it, but then they don't get back to what they were originally looking at, which was the goal of this human trafficking. They're only stuck in the names of the people. And then that leads them into maybe political information, and then that leads them to something else. And then they're farther and farther off what they were supposed to be seeing. In human trafficking, the details of the routes, the stories even sometimes of the people are the details. And people can get stuck in that so much so that they become blind to the biggest picture of what it was, what its goal was intended for. And that's why it remains. Because you are correct, we can't solve a problem that we can't see. And if all we see is the details, the routes, the names of the people, the horror stories, the violence, if all we see is the locations or the astrological signs, if all we see is the energetic, then we are not seeing the whole, and we can't solve it. That is the matrix itself that everyone talks about. An interwoven system of controls made on purpose to keep people so stuck in each turn, each angle, each lit up scenario, each corner of darkness. It's intended to keep them trapped and stuck in it consciously, energetically, and in their language, so that they never see the fullest, biggest picture or the way out. No one can see a way out if they can't see what they're in. Mm-hmm. In human trafficking, you're dealing with, and I'm only speaking on the biggest, broadest scale, okay, without the details. In all human trafficking, in any route, in any country, any survivor of it, from anywhere, you are dealing with mind control, psychological warfare. You're dealing with emotional operations. You're dealing with conscious awareness. You're dealing with the spirit itself. You're dealing with magic. You're dealing with energetic. You're dealing with financial. You're dealing with family, relationships, connections to everything, from their children, their family, their friends, to God itself. It's the largest ritual, and you're dealing with all of those things. It's so hard to talk about it as a whole because of what we just said, because it encompasses so much. That to talk about it as a whole, of course, when we're done, it's going to naturally lead to 100 questions. But that is how it should be talked about, is at the biggest scale, so that it keeps people's vision on the intention of it. Why is there human trafficking in the first place? what is its intention and what is the gain? Because maybe if we could see the biggest picture, the biggest, not a color, not a race, not a gender, not a location, not a country, not a where is it happening or who's warring over it or what political agenda. No, like step farther back and see it as a human species, see it as a whole. Why is it happening and what are they gaining from it? Maybe then maybe it could be addressed. And of course there would be questions, but maybe then the questions could be more geared towards addressing the problem instead of just like microscope staring at all of the gory details all the time. I feel like that's been so overdone. And I think you would agree. We've all had to talk about the pain and the suffering and the stories, and they are absolutely priceless and they're valuable beyond measure. None of us would have learned anything without them. But I think we're all ready to, we don't need any more examples of the pain. I think we're all ready to move more toward a solution. And getting out of the details might be the next step in coming up with a solution. You know, it's such an emotionally pulling, and it is one of the heaviest depths of emotions I've ever experienced or worked with, and it still is. And I think every client we've ever had would agree. The emotional pull and toll and depth of it is strong, and it's valid that it is that strong. But Brittany and I have talked about it a lot, and we both think that maybe the best approach going forward in coming up with a solution or working any more towards ending it needs to be looked at with the emotions backed up a little bit, or with the emotions removed slightly going forward. I don't think any one of us need to feel any more pain to know we don't want that to continue anymore. No. And I think one of the biggest problems in working to end human trafficking globally, with anyone who has done any work from awareness to boots on the ground doing the job, we have all struggled and suffered with the loss of the ability to see what a world looks like without it. We have worked so hard in ending it that we see it everywhere. And we see the pain everywhere. We see the struggle everywhere. We see the deceit, the governmental lies. We see it in the media. We see it in the mind control. We see it in the division. We're seeing it in the fights between people. And it makes all of us forget, what is the world supposed to look like when it's not here? What does a world look like without it? What does your life look like if it doesn't exist anymore? If all of us are successful tomorrow at ending it completely, what does that look like? Yeah. Maybe if we could all start seeing that, because we all create what we speak. And that's something that needs to be talked about more too, and is a large part of why human trafficking has been kept going as long as it has been the blindness of the world to realize that their words are what speak life. So if we continue to speak that it exists and that it can't be ended, then it won't be.
You make some very good points about, some of the approaches we should take. And I'm in agreement, because the way you describe the pain, the suffering, what I learned working in this field is survivors there is no end date to the healing. There is no end date to the trauma. I have never seen it, never, and I'm not going to sit and say that people are healed. I have met people even, just recently, and they have been, they exited 15 years ago, and they're still talking about aspects of the trauma. Yes. I learned this. That's why for me, what I thought was the approach that I chose to take was prevention.
Yes.
Because I learned that once you're in, then, and not trafficking is broad. You've mentioned so many aspects of it, and I cannot forget, I know I'm diverting a little, but I must mention this. You said in the first interview, which I did not, and many people caught it, you said we are all trafficked.
Yes.
And you see, yeah, many people caught that because they were like, what does that even mean? I was like, you got to do your own research, but,
You were the very first person to bring that up in our lives. You have mentioned that to us before, that people caught on to that in the last podcast. You're the very first ones. So the people on your show and you are the very first ones to catch that we have said that, and we have said it for 5 years. And you and your followers are the first ones that caught it.
wow, I have.
That is a step towards ending human trafficking. That, please don't underestimate that right there. Catching the awareness that we are all and all have been that is an astronomical step in ending human trafficking.
But I was going to say that I found that prevention was one of the most important ways. We just, like you said, we just have to stop it before it happens. And I think this coincides with what you're saying is, can we imagine if we didn't have it?
Yes, that is part of prevention. And you are so correct. Prevention is necessary 100%. With prevention, mixed in, which I'm sure you already do, which is why we respect you so much. Inside prevention is awareness of what the problem was. What are you preventing? You're preventing history from repeating itself. You are preventing a pain before it happens. And the only way that it can be prevented is for you to know it. And you do. You know the pain. That's why you're able to work to prevent it. That's why you're the guy for the job. That's why it's amazing. And prevention inside of it is awareness and support, counseling. It's all wrapped in truth and safety without divide and separation. That, and it is necessary. And the sister part, right? Which sister part of prevention is what we talked about, which is to keep it broad and know how to move forward without moving back into it in the event that prevention didn't work. It's like the backup plan. We need to we would love nothing more than to step from the front line working to end human trafficking to you being the front line, which is prevention, meaning we have stopped it. Now you're preventing it from ever coming back. And we step to the back end of, we are here to serve as the reminder of why and the guidance for how to keep moving forward without getting back in it. And of course, always the rescue backup plan just in case. But we don't want there to ever be just in case. We want it to be gone.
Yeah, and in your opinion, what do you think, or what more I know this is a big and very broad question that I'm about to lay on you today. I know it, and I just,
I like how she says it. I'm about to lay
give it your best shot. Give it your best shot. In your opinion, what more could governments, civilians, policymakers, the police, the hospitals, basically everyone, what more could they do to address the root causes of human trafficking?
They could step down. Every single one of them. And step down. And I am not in any way saying that I'm not individualizing any of these people. You just mentioned a very large base of people. There's millions of people in who you mentioned there.
Yeah.
As a broad answer, every one of them need to step down. Every one of those people that you mentioned have been in, including up till today and going back, they have been in a position of authority. They have been in a position defined as those are the people that should be responsible for and have jurisdiction over the judgment and the justice for human trafficking, but have not. They have not been able to get the problem under control. They have not been able to end it, nor have they adequately been able to make a difference in it. Not in any way that any of us in any country or any walk of life would agree has been enough or good enough. No one would agree. So looking at that alone, they aren't the people for the job. not in ending human trafficking. They've all made it clear that their ideas, their ways have not worked. And that's not a negative judgment call. It's an observation. These people may have given it their absolute best, everything they've had for as long as they've been in that position of authority, but it hasn't worked. And for some reason, they have all refused to listen to all of the rest of us that are all out here working in it from prevention through burial. They've refused to see what it is, to hear all of our ideas. They've refused to let any of us try. They have tied your hands in stepping in to do the physical work, the same as they have tied ours. So what is my advice or suggestion with all of them? They need to step down. They should not have the authority or the unilateral decision-making control in the efforts to end human trafficking, because they have had them for too long and their decisions have not been good. Maybe they keep their positions in everything else that they do. Maybe they're really good at every other, part of that job description that authority gives them, but not at the human trafficking angle. They have, all these governments and officials in every country have refused to even redefine human trafficking. Hell, they've refused to define it in the first place to better encompass what it actually is. They have it listed as such a limited thing that in and of itself has tied everyone's hands in getting any sort of legal assistance. We can't go to police. We can't go to senators, legislators, presidents, or embassies. We have. And Brittany and I have over 2,100 hours of recorded video and audio proof of going to every one of those agencies. And them openly admitting and validating, yes, what we are saying is correct. The last ones was a large government official who is still currently standing, who openly spoke, yes, everything you just said is correct. But what are we supposed to do? We can't arrest anyone. The things you just spoke are not illegal. Because they are not. Because ritual abuse is not legal it's not illegal in any country. There's no law that makes it illegal because they refuse to admit it exists. Demons are still considered mythological in most countries, so you cannot get any sort of assistance for spiritual warfare, demonic attack. The governments and authorities of every type, including but not limited to the presidents, prime ministers, the royal family, and every police and Garda and Interpol, have stated that mind control is a thing, but their country does not list it as in existence. So if they aren't even telling the people these things exist, they definitely have not made a law making it illegal. And if it's not illegal, and you go to the police and say, they're attacking me with frequency and it's making my ears bleed, and then you prove it, they still can't arrest anyone. It's not illegal. And if you go to them with photos of rituals where children are dead in the photos, I'm in them. It is not illegal, and they cannot make arrests because satanic rituals are considered a conspiracy in this country and legally defined as non-existent. So there is no legal recourse. Human trafficking is the world's largest ritual, and it has been hidden in our faces, in legal writings, in court definitions, through maritime law and everything else. It's not illegal. That's why it is allowed. It's not illegal. Prostitution is the only part of human trafficking that's legally defined. If you can't show that a wad of money changed hands and a child under 18 was given in return, and you'd still have to have the audio proof of the person handing them the money specifically stating, here's money in exchange for that child, then and only then is it legally defined as human trafficking. Every single other route and aspect is still defined as conspiracy only, or it is not defined at all. So there has been no authoritative or legal or governmental assistance. They need to step down. Their Tower of Babel has grown too large. Their lack of awareness or absolute refusal to look at words, their inadequacy at opening their mind or seeing what's taking place in the areas, towns, cities, or countries they supposedly rule or govern is too apparent. They need to step down. They are not the guy for the job.
You know, what you're saying has a lot of it has a lot of validity, because when you look at the laws that are in place to address human trafficking, when the victims, let's replace that with survivors.
Yes.
When the survivors come forward and actually want to open a case, is they usually get thrown out because of lack of evidence. And because
can we go back to replacing the word victim with survivor? Because in every law that they have written for human trafficking, yes, in their wording, which is important, in their wording, they say victims, not survivors, which means every victim is no longer breathing. They do not help survivors of human trafficking. They only help those who have already passed.
And now I'm going to throw a wrench in here. All of our legal definitions of human trafficking in the United States, all of them only use the word victim. And victim by etymology and definition everywhere means dead. Mm-hmm. Because it was defined by the Roman Catholic Church under the same precedent that they defined saints. In order to be a saint, one must be dead as well. They like to only serve the dead. The same rules apply. And she's correct. We call ourselves survivors. So when we come forward, or any survivor, and we've gone to court with many, mm-hmm. and they try to tell their story, because they're breathing, there is no legal recourse. If Brittany and I brought a dead body to an authority, then they could do something, and they still couldn't do anything about the trafficking that took place to this person, even if we provided all proof, eyewitnesses, and video for 73 years of evidence. The dead body is the only thing that is legally allowed to be addressed. Who killed it? Because murder is illegal. But not human trafficking. But not all of the rest. If this person was mind controlled into taking their own life, it's labeled as suicide, not murder, even if we provide the proof. Even if we bring forward the people that did it, because we have. It is not illegal. Because mind control is not legally defined. MK Ultra is still listed as something that ended in 1967. When in 1994, the men that did it in 1967 gave a live interview saying that all they did was change the names. Why? Because the legal definition said you can't do it like this. If you call it something else, though, it's still perfectly allowed. Human trafficking says you cannot sell a child. A child, by definition, has parents. If one is made in an IVF lab, an abortion clinic, or unwanted, it's not legally a child. The world isn't even aware of that. The birth certificate issue, any child without a birth certificate is considered perfectly legal to sell. Because the only reason that human trafficking and selling for money a child is illegal is because someone owns the stock. Some country and government and a bank owns the birth certificate, the stock, so you sold someone else's property illegally. That's why you can't traffic a person, because you're selling someone else's property. They still need to make owning a person as property illegal before we'll ever get anywhere. You know, they can go on TV and say they ended slavery and sure put on a really good movie that looks like they did. And all they had to do was take the chains off and then just convince the people to stay in the cages. That's not illegal. The chains were the only thing that were illegal. You can own them, you just can't chain them. The definitions, it's in the wording, it's in all of it. We wrote a federal tort against the United States, anyone they have ever governed and anyone ever been governed by. And it was denied. We turned in over 25 pages of photos and physical proof of the rape and torture of multiple children. We gave eyewitness statements, audio and video recording. And the reason we were denied was because human trafficking during the times that these photos took place was not illegal. Human trafficking in and of itself was only made illegal anywhere in the United States in, what, 2000?
Early 2000s, yeah.
So every survivor that steps forward and says they watched children murdered in 1991 can't find any sort of help or justice, because in 1991, human trafficking in Utah was not illegal. You could sell all of your kids in Utah in 1991. There was no law in the books. I mean, sure, it was considered distasteful, probably was frowned upon, but it wasn't illegal. And most of it still isn't, as long as you're not talking about murder or prostitution. As long as there's no money changing hands, it's okay. The United States government said on the phone to us 2 weeks ago, yes, I know this is happening to you. What do you want us to do? We can't arrest anyone. It's not illegal. You're talking about survivors or victims. Most escape with no proof. How would they have audio or video recordings of these things that happened to them? Exactly. We pulled children out absolutely butt naked in a tote, covered from head to toe in her own excrement. I was not about to search that room for, is there audio or video? Is there an eyewitness nearby that could give Brittany a statement really quickly? No, ma'am. I grabbed that baby and ran for my life. The evidence, the proof was the child. I was holding the proof. Do you know what they did for us? They threatened us. They told us we were stirring the pot. There was a word in there, but you know, I'm not going to cuss on your podcast, but I was stirring the pot. They wanted me to leave it alone. They didn't help us, or that child. They said I could not prove she was being human trafficked. I had the child. I pulled her out of a postal tote, a United States Post Office plastic tote, in a storeroom at a shipping store in broad daylight. And they said I couldn't prove that that child was human trafficked. Why? I didn't have any video recording of her being sold and money changing hands. The internal repairs that that child took apparently were not proof of anything. They were proof of extensive abuse, but because I could not provide a video of how or who, no files, no charges were filed. And because she didn't have a birth certificate and I could not identify her parents, They wouldn't even take her into CPS custody, and we would never have given a child to CPS custody anyway. But they did tell me that. I'm sorry, we can't take her into the system without proper documentation. We don't know who her parents are. We don't know who's responsible for her. We don't have jurisdiction. She weighed 20 pounds and she was 7 years old. And she was 28 inches tall. She was the size of a 2-year-old. The problem is in the wording, and the governments and authorities and officials know that. They are not unaware. But their paychecks and their fancy cars and all their money causes them to put on blinders and overlook it. They should all step down.
Yeah, because the evidence that is required is almost impossible to provide from a survivor. And I always say victim survivor because I know that legally, if you want any kind of help,
Yes.
you need to identify yourself as a victim, even
Yes.
though you're a survivor. This
Yes.
is in the laws. Even when you read all the papers, articles, all the paperwork, all the definitions, they talk about victims, like you have
Yes.
said. That's why I always say victim survivor, because if you're somebody who's listening to this and you want to seek help, you are seen and identified legally as a victim.
Yes.
Although we know that you're a survivor because you're
Yes.
here, breathing and in the flesh. We know you're a survivor. But you're very right, because the evidence that is required is almost impossible to provide.
And it's ridiculous. It is so almost impossible. But as we just said, even when you do have it, they still don't help you. So what is that to put that on a survivor? To ask them for impossible evidence and then make them work for how long to try to gather up any of that they can, just to be turned down for them to say, well, you did provide enough evidence, but your particular crime somehow isn't a crime. It's not illegal, which makes you not a victim, and therefore you're not eligible for any of our services, because they only provide victim services. And do you know why that's disturbing? Every single one of these laws is written on the basis of death. It's written on, they speak death. It's every service is to someone who is already broken. Every service is for victims. Every help available through authorities is for someone who has already been harmed. There is no services for someone trying to stop it before they get harmed. There's no preventative. No. All of the laws and rules are written on behalf of the dead. You can seek recourse and justice if there's death. My family can sue them for wrongful death if I die, but my family can't go after anyone for the torture and anguish and trauma I've had to live through and the result that has had on my family. They can't do anything about that. But if I were dead, the same things they couldn't do anything about yesterday, they now could. Everything, it is all written on death. We call it demon speak. This is the land of the dead. They give the rights to the dead. They don't want anything alive here.
But
They don't.
What this has done is it has, when other people who have been trafficked watch what happens to the people who come forward and their case has been thrown out and the evidence not, they get intimidated and they just see how hopeless the process is.
Yes.
And I think this also kind of reinforces people staying in because you know what is happening during human trafficking. You're being threatened, your family's being threatened. There's so much going in. So a lot of the victim survivors um, are intimidated and kind of like they lose hope when they watch the brave ones who exited, who tried to take measures, failing repeatedly, and so they just say, you know what, it's better just to pay off this 50,000 euro debt for whatever it is and then just call it a day. Have you experienced this in your work?
We have experienced the people wanting to give up, but we don't quit. And Brittany and I have not failed. It may look like we have failed to find help for ourselves anywhere. And it may look like we have failed to find any sort of authority or justice or governmental person or agency that would be willing to help or even able to help ourselves or any of these children. And that would be correct. We did find failure, but not in our work. We found failure in those people, not in us. And all of these survivors that we work with have not quit because they found themselves. When they reach so many times for something outside of themselves and it says no and won't help and they find no justice, it breaks me every time. I hate hearing their stories, but it fuels me to remind them one more time, they're still breathing. They're still breathing.
Oh yeah, but you have, what I meant was, you see, you have the survivors, the people who've exited come to you, but do they share what their friends or colleagues who are still being trafficked? Because that's what I saw when they would say, my friend won't leave because, then they would tell the reasons why, because their situation is not looking so positive, it's not inspiring, those who are still trafficked in the house they shared or whatever, to leave or something like this. Have you also experienced this?
Yes, but we've experienced more of them telling us that's how it used to be, that they wouldn't, that there were multiple people that's all they saw was that there was no help from the police and there was no help from anybody else. And they had heard the tales and the stories from, well, this girl got out and then she couldn't find any help and she ended up in another bad situation. And yes, that is what was happening in the past. But in the 2+ years that we've been doing this public, we have seen and heard like a changeover from that is what was happening to like, I don't know what to call it, almost like a giant movement. That changeover has been a movement. Yes, like a movement, a shift in the mindset of people, even especially in the mindset of the victims that are still in it and the survivors trying to get out, the mindset of the survivors, even still in it they were hopeless before. They are seeing that the authorities and the justice system and the courts aren't helping. They are seeing that there is not help in those places. But instead of it causing them to feel hopeless and like there is no way, it has created a shift in all of them seeing that there just needed to be another way, that was not the way, and that has been the best thing we have seen. I don't know, I don't claim to know where that motivation or that hope came from, but it's there. They're all seeing that was just not the way. No, we've seen a large movement and shift towards, okay, guys, clearly the authorities are not the way, okay? We need to stop looking at that because there's just a whole lot of disappointment over there. There has to be another way. If everyone has continued to look at the justice system and the authorities as the answer for everything, and they're not getting anywhere, there just simply has to be another way.
Interesting. And I think so it's more a case of self-empowerment, taking what kind of ownership and taking everything matters into your own hands and not even, seeking help from, external forces like.
Yes, because these survivors survived, even when they're still in it and feeling they have a moment of, oh my God, I have survived. They've survived some of the most horrific atrocities in human history. So all we have seen is generally that's all it takes is for them to realize you have survived some of the largest atrocities in human history and you're still standing. Clearly, these authorities and judges and presidents and police, they're not the reason you're still standing today, so they aren't needed for you to continue to stand and breathe. They did not assist in that process so far. That's part of the mind control and the programming, is to think that those people with those titles and those authorities and those jurisdiction are the only ones that can help you. That's incorrect. And then they're stepping out of that and seeing they can do things. And just like myself and Brittany and so many that we've met, a lot of these survivors find themselves in a situation where they can't help their self and they still want to fight. So they do like I did. When I could not help myself, I could damn sure help somebody else. I may not have been able to help me, but I could help her. And she may not have been able to help herself, but she saved my life repeatedly. And then we started to learn, even when you are chained and bound and trapped and you can't get out yourself, you can still help someone else. And through that, we're all getting each other out. The survivors that haven't been able to do a thing to get themselves out are saving the lives of hundreds.
Isn't that incredible?
Yes.
The immense strength, and how the solution or the help that you're looking for may
Is
come
you.
from the most unexpected places.
It's you.
Yeah.
The help everyone is looking for is us. It's themselves. They're looking
but
to them.
We've talked on this show about, I think it was, with one of our guests, we talked about the savior programming.
There is one.
That is embedded within the human psyche. And I'm overgeneralizing. I know it's not everybody, but it is there. We see it everywhere, where people ask and beg for a leader, where they beg for an authority figure to guide them and to tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it. So, this is something I think that we cannot ignore, because I think it creates a little bit of a bump, for lack of better words, a bump in the road to that, what you have described, this self-empowerment, this taking ownership for your own life, and knowing that you have everything within you, that you have everything within you to actually, I don't want to say liberate yourself, free yourself, but actually even heal yourself. You know what I mean?
Yes, and that's how we were all designed. It represents itself. It replays over and over through the macro and the micro, okay? The whole savior programming was able to be put onto humanity in hundreds of colorful, creative, different ways, shapes, and forms throughout time, because it's how we were all designed in the beginning. We were all created by one thing that started in the first place. So by nature, we would all look to something above us, something greater than us, to tell us what to do next and what our job is. Hey, why you made me? What do I do? Hey, boss, what am I here for? By nature, we all look to that. Every cell inside of our body looks to our brain to tell us what it is supposed to do. Our molecules do the same thing. Everything looks to something above it to get guidance and direction on what its purpose is, something bigger than itself, because it represents. And same with us, all humans are born with it. From the moment we're born, you have parents, and you look to your parents to tell you what to do next. What are you here for? Who are you? Otherwise, you wouldn't even have a clue. You wouldn't know who you were or what you were doing, we all do that. And the savior program was able to be put over people as like a takeover of nature's design, a takeover of God's design, at the greatest, highest level. And human trafficking was born as a result of that takeover. So yeah, everyone is still looking for someone outside of themselves because we're designed to by nature. We were supposed to seek and you'll find. We were supposed to seek the connection with the thing that made us. And instead, the world has taught people to search for authorities and cops and the mayor and your neighbor or a friend you think is smarter or a therapist or a teacher. You're taught through every aspect of your life. Oh, your teacher's smarter than your parents. Oh, your parents are God. Your teacher's God. The doctor's God. The president's God. The person on TV is God. Kim Kardashian somehow is God. I don't know. Caitlyn Jenner can't figure out what God it is, but that's a God. Whatever. Like serious. Okay, so it's just the takeover of the grand design that has to be eliminated, and most people don't make it through that process in their awakening of conscious awareness or understanding of what human trafficking is, and both of those go hand in hand. You're not going to understand the largest information on human trafficking without full conscious awareness, and when both of those happen, you're going to realize there is something much bigger than you that you cannot control, and it very much has influence. And so then it becomes, what do you listen to? The creator that made all of us lives in us, not outside of us. So every time we look to an authority figure outside of us, we're making a wrong choice to begin with. You're going to get the wrong answer. We have to self-empower because what made us is greater than us. So by logic, it knows more.
Yeah, and one of our guests called this this act of breaking all the structures. I think she called it breaking the ivory tower.
Yeah,
I like that.
I like that. I'll mix that with our Tower of Babel. With the language. Everyone speaks a different language. You have like the church language, and they teach you what supposedly connecting with God. I don't even like the words, God, creator.
I know.
I'm comfortable with whatever. It's the same thing. We're all made by the same thing. I don't care.
Source.
I don't care if you call it Tinkerbell. Like, it doesn't make any difference to me. Whatever. I'm open. That guy. Whatever. But we were made. The churches teach everybody it looks one way, and they use a specific kind of language, and then New Age spirituality uses a totally different language. Buddhism, Hindu, uses a totally different language. Conservative Christians use a different language. Catholics use a totally different language. The Satanic Church, uses a totally different language. Good Lord, Hermetics, alchemy, science, they all use a different language to describe the exact same things, and it just creates a jumble of people not understanding anything, and people like warring against each other and colliding and telling your beliefs are wrong and mine are right, and that's the
when
looking
really
outside of
everyone's
yourself.
just looking at it from a different angle.
Look at the angles. Oh, or are they angels? Which one? They're spelled the same, aren't they? Angles, angels. Huh? They're all light.
Yeah, I like when you were talking about. I want to just go back a little bit to when you were talking about the self-empowerment and taking ownership, and how you have experienced this huge shift of, I'll just say, consciousness and awareness of, I survived this, and actually that means I can do this. And just you sharing this, I think will help people really understand the possibilities of moving forward and rebuilding your life after experiencing this stuff, using that as a template. So can you walk us through what in your experience, these survivors who are self-empowered, who know how to take ownership, are able to rebuild their lives? These survivors they're taking self-ownership. They're self-empowered. They know, I survived this. I got this.
Are you asking what does it look like going forward after?
Yeah, because they already have this this is a very solid template in my understanding. It's a very solid, like a very great foundation to have. So I'm just wondering how, moving forward, if you could share with our listeners, how are they able to rebuild their lives from this foundation? or with this foundation in mind.
So how are they supposed to take the foundation?
After gaining the self-awareness
There
and
we go.
everything, how to...
Yeah, they already have it, right? They have it the way you described it.
No,
No,
some.
actually, we have our own self-awareness guide. We wrote a self-awareness book. It's a workbook for everyone. It's on Amazon.
Two of them.
Yeah.
Those help.
We also have one called Who Do You Listen To? So that goes, both those go what we were talking about. So it's actually been a learning process
Yes.
of finding themselves first.
Yes. We have come across, thank you, because that's what I thought she was asking. Yes. The self-empowerment is the foundation, like for them to realize, for all survivors to realize you have survived. And the foundation you have to stand on is you made it. You are here. You are strong enough to do this because you are breathing. You are okay. You're a survivor. But some of them haven't gotten there yet. There's still too much in the trauma. That's what we have come across is they must establish that foundation first. And that seems to be what's taking place, in our work anyway. That's what's been taking place for the past several months or a year, is that is growing. We're seeing more and more and more survivors come to that point where they do realize that. That is necessary for step one is they have to realize they have that foundation to start with. Then going forward after they do realize that, and there's lots of ways, we work with them on self-awareness, discovering who they are, seeing their own strengths, trying to show them they are a survivor instead of a victim so that they can start with that foundation. And that's what Brittany's talking about. We write books on little guides on how they can help guide themselves through that self-awareness and come to the empowerment and come to that foundation, their self, without the programming and leading or anything like that. Once they start with that foundation going forward, how do they build their lives? That foundation pretty much gives them the choices on what they want it to look like going forward.
It kind of slowly helps them move through making the decisions and the changes while figuring out who they are.
And we have not been able to, not yet, we haven't gotten to the part yet, we're just getting there, where we get to watch a bunch of survivors take those steps to go forward. We've only seen a handful of them get there so far. But what we have been seeing, like our own clients, they take that foundation and they move forward with small steps. First, they want to try living on their own. They've been usually under heavy control. So they first want to try living on their own, whatever that looks like. And please remember, this is a spectrum. So it looks very individual with each individual person. But the steps are roughly the same, in a broad category kind of way of speaking. They are kind of the same. Usually they get the foundation, and that is necessary first. If they don't have that foundation of solid in who they are and that they can stand on their own and they do have power enough to protect themselves and make decisions for themselves, they have to have that first. But going forward, it's usually really small steps, and that is, if they follow roughly a similar pattern, they want to live on their own first, see what that's like. In living on their own, they get a lot of really good everyday practice on decision making, which has been a big problem with every single client we have ever worked with and every survivor we have had the honor of speaking to. The problem that they face the most, and it has so far been 100% of them. So it's the largest, what do we want to call that? Side effect? I don't want to call it a symptom. That sounds like an illness, but a side effect of being a survivor. Yeah, a struggle, a side effect of being a survivor is the very large challenge in making decisions. Sometimes even the smallest ones that society would look at as insignificant, like what to wear or what to eat.
Yeah.
Whether or not to get out of bed or when to go to bed. Like the rest of the world looks at these as very tiny things, but to our survivors, those are huge, and we celebrate them all. But they usually start out with a foundation, then they want to live on their own, so that while they're living on their own, they can practice all those little tiny things like autonomy, getting up when they want, going to bed when they want, eating what or when they want to watch TV or to go outside or read a book, to make choices, little ones for themselves, how often they want to shower, things like that. Then they move forward from there, and we don't and have not had to have a hands-on part in them going forward past that, because getting through that, it's like in the practice to make the little decisions on their own, they grow so much more self-empowerment in every little one. Then the creativity opens and they get that back in their mind and the confidence comes in. So then their smaller decisions start leading to bigger ones, like they want to explore a hobby, or they want to learn a new skill, or they want to try a job, or they want to work from home, or they want to travel, so it moves on to the next part of their lives pretty fluidly. We spend most of our time doing 24-hour round-the-clock support through the whole stage of getting them out, getting them safe. Nobody can kill them anymore, because we start there with they are in life or death situations most of the time. So we stay with them, and our work is generally all through the stage of getting them out, getting them safe, helping them learn that foundation of who they are and self-empowerment by getting all of those controls and programs and outside forces off of them. We do a large part of our every single day work is deprogramming and demon removal and control removal. So we help hands-on through all of that, and once they are empowered, then they choose to go on to the next steps of learning to live independently, and we stay hands-on through that whole process. And that takes a different amount of time based on each person. Some of them, Clobo is going on a year.
Yeah.
We have there's not a short process, sometimes.
Not
Right, no, sometimes it takes, we have our first rescues flew the coop. Our very first rescues that we rescued and brought here a long time ago were empowered, and they decided to live on their own, and we feel like parents. They're doing amazing. They are doing amazing. They are
we love hearing from them. And
yes,
knowing how they're doing.
Yes, and we still stay hands-on with them through this whole process. We have gone out there. They're several states away from us now, and they're on their own. And we have traveled out there to help anytime they have run into a crisis since they pulled out of the driveway. And we're still on the phone anytime, and we still check in. And they became my children. There was no other way. They became Brittany's kids. It doesn't matter that they were older than her.
Those are the only ones that are not older than me.
Yeah. And it didn't make any difference. They become your heart. And so we stay with them through all of that. And now they, in the past like two-ish months, are now working. Well, they've been doing it for a while, but more, very much more. In the past couple of months, they are now working to advocate for people and be counselors for people and work to end human trafficking where they are. And so we have been much less hands-on and way more the cheering squad of proud and wow, you're doing amazing. So that's how they move forward. And we don't really have a lot of hands-on work in that because it's empowerment. It's self-empowerment. So as soon as they're self-empowered, they just run with it. And we don't want to put our opinions or say so, we don't want to have any sort of controls or influence over that. That was what we got them out. So
exactly.
So our work is in getting them out and getting them safe and building the foundation with them. And then I protect them with everything we are while they are learning, while they're taking their steps and they're learning how to breathe. And then we just step back, and I will always be there. There will never be a distance too far. Never. There never has been. So we'll be there forever, but it's their free will. They want to go live. And that's what makes me the happiest, is because before they knew us, before we met them, they weren't alive, okay? They didn't live. They survived, thank God, but they didn't live. They didn't experience the life that they came here to experience yet. You know, they didn't get to make their own choices. They had been controlled. So it's like they leave us and they're supposed to, and it's sad. You know, we miss them, but it's so happy that I don't think the sad comes in. It's more like a yes. You know, they watch them.
Yeah,
we get to watch them live. Yeah, we get to watch them live. And they call and tell us about all the things they've just done for the very first time. And it's the best parts. And those are the moments that make it where I would not change one day of work that we have done. I would go through the hardest of all of them tenfold over again just to hear the one moment of they were free for one day.
When we talk about these things, I think people cannot imagine, unless you do this work, you can't imagine the complexity of what you're describing.
Yes, I just talked about it really bullet point and without any detail, and I'm so glad you recognize that. I appreciate it.
When you were listening and saying, oh, you know, we don't actually do it, I'm like, no, that is a whole lot, because you are between a counselor, psychologist, mentor, supervisor, guidance counselor,
alchemy, hermetics, medical, like, oh, good grief. All of these people come to us with medical ailments, okay? We'll talk about that for about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Now let's give the legal disclaimer. Brittany and I are not physicians. We are not medical professionals. Please contact your physician. And this is for educational or entertainment purposes only. You know, none of our advice is meant to replace the advice of your doctor. There you go. That's legal. But they all come to us, you know, so we're not doctors or nurses, and neither one of us have medical training beyond CPR, first aid, and the AEDs. You know, we're medical trained.
I got a little bit more than that, but
you have a lot more than me. Okay? Medical, as far as the medical care training, we're not medical professionals, but every single survivor that we have ever met has come to us. When we first meet them, they have a medical problem. That is a guarantee. It's either an injury or a wound, or a lot of those, or a medical condition, either undiagnosed or diagnosed, that has gone untreated for a very long time. You know, so they come to us sick and ill and injured, and generally in a lot of physical pain. And those things have to be handled immediately. I mean, because you're not going to be able to do any sort of counseling. You're not going to be able to help someone heal. You're not going to be able to do any deprogramming, and they aren't going to feel comfortable in their own skin or safe if that medical thing is still the only thing on their mind. You know, if that physical pain or that injury is the only thing they can think about. But we aren't medical professionals, so they come to us with all these ailments that we don't have one single idea on how to do any of that. But in the very beginning, we learned real fast, and so now we just don't try, but we couldn't get any doctors or nurses to properly take care of these people or address the injuries or illnesses either. And I don't want to sound negative or hopeless. That was something we ran into, just like we had to learn the hard way that the governments and the authorities were not the answer. That doesn't mean they aren't good people. Actually, that means that most of those people need help too. We were asking the wrong people, you know. But we couldn't get any doctors or nurses to help either. So we have had to address every single medical ailment and injury by ourselves, and we're not medical people. Thank God for Brittany here, had done just for like a hobby. It's just because it's what she was into. It's just her own self. She had learned a whole bunch before we ever did this, just on her own, about herbs and natural medicine and foods, how foods can change things in the body, and water, and just all of the natural, amazing everything about plants and basil. I didn't even know holy basil was an herb, okay, before I met Brittany, and now it's in our food. Yeah, so Nothing. I didn't know anything about it. With no medical training and no guidance and no reference manual, Brittany, cure rashes and sores and stomach problems and internal bleeding.
Well, now let's enter in. I have this
with food,
sense.
She can smell it.
So I can smell the illnesses and the different things that are wrong with the body, which I don't typically explain. So this is weird.
I'm glad you are, though.
Yeah.
So just like different things, like they just have a certain smell. So there's certain things that I've known, like that I've used for myself that have helped, because I can smell occasionally if I smell that certain way for myself, like if I'm getting ill.
Yeah.
So I know what things have helped me, so I started using it for everyone else.
And they work. Brittany can smell if someone's getting a cold or if somebody's coming down with the flu. She can smell diseases.
If somebody uses my bathroom and has a urinary tract infection, I can tell you.
Or if their kidneys aren't functioning properly, she can tell. And then I've watched her be able to adjust it with just food or herbs like cilantro or holy basil or mullein, peppermint, just things that are safe that people can change on their own with foods and plants, and the problem goes away and the pain goes away and the injury heals, and it's been amazing. But we've had to deal with all of the medical issues, and that was just like watching God work. We had no skills, there's no training for this, and we were told, put all your skills that you have together and do everything you can. And one of her skills is the ability to smell strange things. And even though we laughed about it for years, we lost count on how many people have thanked her profoundly for making a game-changing difference in their life with a thing like that. It's been
you reminded me of a guest we had on who talked about how sometimes you have this spiritual knowledge, maybe from your past life or your ancestors, that is just activated at the right time when you need it, how you need it. She was talking about how she just started knowing this is the right herb for this person and for this illness,
yes,
and for this, and she just had the knowledge. She didn't need to go to school or anything. It was very profound, and now you're talking about it again. It's really interesting that more people are showing up with these abilities. So that's something we should look more into. It's
our abilities and gifts are what has got us through. They are the tools we have used that have got us through all of the work we have done. Mine were forced upon me or caused to me, and for the longest time, I looked at them as bad or a curse or evil because of where they came from and what they were used for when I was a child, the things I was made to do with them. I turned from them for a long time, and it was because of Brittany when I met her. And she showed no judgment and was kind and showed me her perspective on everything that I had not looked at because of my own trauma. It was only through that I was even able to accept the gifts I had been dealing with my whole life. But without those tools, we would have never, ever been able to do, without your gifts and my gift, we would not have gotten through that very first time we decided to follow a map back to the very first place I was sold and just go see if I could find some closure for myself. We were not public. We were not a business entity, and no one knew we were doing this besides ourselves and our husbands. We just went back there to see if there was some sort of closure for myself. We wouldn't have lived. We would have died. And not made it home if it weren't for Brittany's gifts and mine on that day, on that whole trip. It was intense. And it became undeniable after that. And it makes you feel crazy for a while when you start talking about it, because these are things no one talks about, and just the language used and the overall attitude towards them has been too long, has been looked at as woo-woo or crazy, when by definition it means to use the mind. And we now, 2 years later, we have been working in the parapsychological war and astral with too many clients. When we started working with it, we didn't even know what astral was.
Didn't even know the word parapsychology yet. No. Okay, not me. I didn't.
We had to learn there was a war taking place in astral, and what that was and what they were using is parapsychological gifts. That's what all of human trafficking is held in place by, if that makes sense. I want to say it the right way. It's not what funds it. It's not, the role the parapsychological gifts play that is what holds human trafficking in place.
You're calling it parapsychology.
Parapsychological gifts. That's just the biggest
gifts. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. That is the biggest, broadest category of all psychic gifts, of all mental or psychological senses or gifts. So clairvoyance.
How does someone know they have these gifts, the parapsychological gifts?
Well, they encompass everything from psychic abilities to mediumship, clairvoyance, clairsentient, all the clairs, telepathy, telekinesis, all of them, every psychic gift. But I think for a long time they were called psychic gifts. Or superpowers, and those words are limited. What they are parapsychological gifts.
It's just
gifts
other
of
parts
the mind
of your brain that are opened up and functioning. Most people's brain only functions, I think it's 10%.
Yeah, between 10 and 12. There's studies
about it. So, most people aren't using the full spectrum of their brain.
Correct.
So unless those light switches are on, or you're able to use your left and right hemispheres at the same time, which, science says is impossible, but I disagree. I disagree.
Right.
Some say it's possible to use the left and the right side of the brain?
Well, they say you can now, but there's, they say it's really hard, and that's like a goal. They say it's a goal, but it's been happening for decades and decades. But she's right. What she's saying is, people don't understand. It's just the human brain. There's so much to it. Most human beings only use 10, 12, what maximum, something 15% of their mind. Well, that leaves a whole lot of the mind. And if roughly 15% of our brain is responsible and gives us the ability, get it? It's in our abilities. It gives us the senses and abilities to see and smell and taste and hear and experience and feel emotions and think, process, dream, plan, be evil, all of the things that we do. That's only 15%. So to me, it's very logical and easy to understand that parapsychological gifts come from the other 70% roughly of the brain that we're not looking at, 80% of the brain we're not looking at. So when one of those areas of the brain turn on, another gift is access. A person just has access now to another sense. Just like smell is a sense for everyone, and Brittany has an extra sense. She can smell things that we can't. It's extra sensory perception, ESP, extra sensory perception. That's all in parapsychological gifts. And hearing things. Dog whistles, some people can hear a dog whistle. Most of people can't hear a dog whistle, but dogs can. So there's proof that there is sound outside of the spectrum of human hearing.
Because for every sense, like she's saying with hearing, for every sense there's a different spectrum.
There's a spectrum on those senses.
A very large spectrum.
Right.
The human mind or ears or whatever can't hear or recognize.
And that's what we're talking about is the brain, the spectrum of the amount of the mind people use. Some people use 15%. And that would be over here on the spectrum, and some people can use way more. And that's how it is. The more of the mind a person can access and use, the more their extrasensory perception or parapsychological gifts come on board. Light switches turn on. A tiny electrical charge in the brain. It shoots over to a spot in the brain it had not been before, and it shines a little light in that area, and it lights things up. Information, memories, access to things. If it lights up a part of your brain where past lives from 3 centuries ago is stored, then a person would become aware of their past lives. Your DNA inside your body carries every single piece of information there ever has been, was, or will be. And it has already been shown, I mean, there's too many documents to bother.
There's studies.
Yes, many studies, that a single piece of DNA can hold more information than all of the written information on the planet. It's up in like terabytes, and it can hold, well, how much do you have in your mind alone, right? Yeah. So all it is a matter of a tiny little light in your brain, that people call it in the Tower of Babel, the spark of life, or your inner light, all it does is shine in a small, tiny little place it had not been before, and all of a sudden, you can see things you did not see before. You can hear things and experience things and remember things that you did not before. And it isn't because they were not there. They were there the whole time. You just did not have access to that yet. That's the parapsychological gifts. They're not as invisible and woo, and out there as sometimes they're shown to be, but
yeah, this is so interesting. This is so interesting. Thank you for sharing this, because it shows that the field of healing medicine is taking also a different path as we begin to realize that there are alternative methods of actually getting help for health-related issues. So this is really, thank you for sharing this aspect of healing and letting people know that there is help, and it comes in the most unexpected packaging,
generally, yes.
Yeah.
And look at what you're saying, open-minded, okay? Open-minded means what we were just talking about a little tiny electrical charge, a little tiny light in your own mind shoots off, and it just happens to light up a spot in your mind that has not been lit up before. That is to be open-minded. Your mind is open to that light shining in a dusty corner you had not seen before. And as long as we don't mentally close ourselves off to those conversations and topics and ideas of hearing something new, hearing a different perspective, a totally different one than you've ever heard before, as long as we remain open to it, then our mind is open for that little light to shoot in a different area. And what we have found is most healing, whether it's psychological, emotional, or physical, of the greatest kind of uncurable diseases, including but not limited to brain tumors, cancer, and worse. Healing can be achieved by simply allowing the person to see what the heal looks like. Like we were talking about ending human trafficking earlier, about there's been a problem with the world, just can't seem to, the environment, everything in it, it's not a flaw on the part of the people. It's kind of just been a side effect that the world stopped being able to see, visualize, or talk about what it looks like when it's already healed, when human trafficking is no more. If we can't see it, it won't happen. And with any physical disease or mental or emotional or psychological ailment, the heal is fast and it's instant, and it does not take time. It takes only a moment, but all it is to shine that light. They just need, the person who has the condition just needs to be able to see the heal. They need to be able to see what their body or their mind or their life looks like after it's healed. If it were already done, what would that be like? What would that feel like? What would your life look like? As soon as they can see that, it is healed and the pain is no more. And we have seen that happen 100%. It has never failed. We've been honored enough to help in that process over the phone, over text message, over DM, and in person with our hands on the person. And they speak.
God.
They speak.
This is
And
really
they
key.
see again, and they heal, and their pain ends, and their temperature goes down. We had a woman who had not spoke in
Like 2 years.
2 years, dementia and brain injury and a medical condition had taken away her ability to speak. And her daughter, adult daughter, brought her to us in hopes that we could lower her pain a little. It was all she was asking for. And we spoke to her, and then she spoke. She could speak. And she started crying and talking to her daughter and freaking out because it had just happened, and she spoke. And she read signs all the way home and went home reading a book, and she wouldn't stop talking. And her daughter
And she
called
could
us.
write again.
She could
She
write.
lost the ability to write.
She hadn't had a conversation.
What do you think unlocked in her that day? What was
We
blocked?
touched her and we spoke to her. We showed her what her life looked like with it gone. We just showed her what her life looked like without that. And she saw it, and she spoke. And then her daughter called us days ago. Days later, her daughter called us days later and was laughing, saying, "My mom won't stop talking. She won't shut up. Like, I didn't know this was going to happen. She just keeps talking."
Yeah, I was going to say that this is a key, an important key to recovery, because if people saw themselves already healed and healthy from what has been diagnosed, and did not claim the illness, because you're saying that you have to already jump into seeing yourself beyond and past what you believe is your
Beyond duality, beyond broken or
yeah, your name, your company, yeah. And if you're able, because most people go to the doctor and then they say, "I have," they already claim it. And instead of doing that, you already go a step further and already see yourself healed, is what I'm getting.
Yes.
And already start reprogramming the illness in your body, is what I'm getting from what you're describing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
because everything repeats itself from the largest macro to the smallest micro. Every cell in our body is looking to something bigger than itself to tell it what to do. It will only do what it's told. That's how we were made. We were made to follow the greatest guidance of that who created us. So if we speak life over a person and show them what their life is like without that illness, their cells will remember, and their cells are anxious and ready. They've been waiting for a long time for something to tell them what to do next. And so if you tell them what it looks like to be healed, their cells will respond appropriately, and they'll jump into action and mobilize, and they will live and behave and act as if they were never sick, and then they are not.
Wow. And I
Disease
think
or the illness is eliminated. Yeah, the disease or illness is eliminated from the body because the cells begin to immediately behave and act as if they were never ill. They act completely healed. They don't act like they're in the healing process. They act as if they already are. And then all sick or dead cells that were left behind the disease obviously do not have a job at that point. If all of the cells collectively are acting as if the heal is done, then they're just immediately going about their business for a healed body, and that leaves behind all of the sick or dead cells to be flushed from the system naturally, while the rest of the whole body moves forward healed. And it's instantaneous because the cells don't want to do anything else except exactly what they're told. They were created to do so. So they are only comfortable when they're doing what they're told. Your brain tells all of the cells in your body what to do. It tells your heart to beat and your blood to pump and all of that. So,
yeah.
but who controls your brain?
Yeah, yeah. I want to thank you so much, Brittany and Cassiopeia. It's been 1.5 hours already. You wouldn't believe it. And I
I'm
want
glad we
to,
got to.
can you believe that? Time just went whoosh. And I want to thank you so much for this very, very valuable information and share today. It's been really, really great talking to you. But before we head out, I just have one last question to close this out. And I feel like I must ask this after all that you have shared. How do you prioritize self care to avoid burnout and
She
getting
just left.
overwhelmed with all that you do in such an emotionally,
After
physically,
I just told you.
psychologically
I
challenging
love
life?
you. I love you so much. I love you so much. I'm gonna let Brittany answer that, but after I laughed about, of course she just asked
Sorry, I
that
had
after
to
I
put you on
told
the
her.
spot, but this is what you've described. I need to know, yeah, how do you do it all? How do
After I
you
tell her
balance
that
this
we
and
couldn't
prioritize
that we
it?
couldn't figure out as survivors how to help ourselves. We couldn't figure out how to help ourselves, and we could not find help for ourselves. So to help ourselves, we just focused on helping everyone else. And through it, we found ourselves and found help. So, how do we prioritize self care? By endlessly sacrificing ourselves for everyone else in humanity. We have absolutely yet to learn self care.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah.
We're really good at telling others how to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
But actually putting the practices in for ourselves over here proves to be challenging. Like we know what to do, but yeah,
We're not the greatest. We are not the greatest.
we're not the
at
greatest
doing it.
example,
Right, of
but we
doing
are
it
good
for
at giving
ourselves.
the answer.
Yeah. You know how we have ended up prioritizing it for the past several years is because of how it has worked out, and we're still constantly looking forward to and trying to find more efficient and better ways. You know, we're open.
We're getting better.
But yeah, how we've been prioritizing it is by prioritizing each other, because we get stuck. Many. Oh, we can talk about that for days. We should do a whole podcast one of these days about MK Ultra sticks. Just those.
We'll
Just get.
do that. Yes.
But we get
Noted.
stuck. Yeah, we have been
Yes.
stuck too many times in. I don't know how to help myself. Like that has been a thing. So prioritizing self-care for us, because we run into those challenges, and until they are different, when I can't prioritize myself, I just focus on her. And when she can't prioritize herself, she just focuses on me, and we somehow manage to get through it. We go crazy. We go full crazy at least once or twice a week, but we make it back, so it's okay. And until there's a better way.
Well, fair enough. I want to then thank you both for answering the call to help others, and
You too.
also for stepping up to the plate.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you again for having us.
Very much.
You are welcome. You're welcome. And unless you have the last word before we head out.
I'm good. I don't know what else to say.
Me either, but if you're interested in any of our books that we talked about, they are on Amazon, and they are available in other countries other than the United States.
Yeah.
So,
And if anybody in the whole world wants to support us or support us in helping another survivor that we support, it is always very much appreciated. We do not charge for our work. We have never had funding. We have never had regular support. We have lost everything we've ever had, and we're currently in an unfinished building. So all of the support in the world, we win this together. We get through it together.
Right now we're working on finishing our headquarters right here for us to work in instead of working in our campers with our families. And we're working on building more shelter for survivors so we can bring them here to you.
And right now I'm working on it not raining in my bedroom.
Okay.
We don't have proper housing, so it still rains in our bedroom.
Well,
That's all.
I just thought of, and it may not be appropriate, but I'm going to share it anyway. When you said raining, I just thought of an African proverb that actually connects this to showers from heaven.
I would love to hear it.
Yeah. So I won't go too much into detail, but it is basically saying that you are being showered from heaven. Okay. Those are showers from heaven. I have to summarize it, just in a nutshell.
All of my life, I was taught God is in the rain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
It's in the rain.
I never understood it, but I held on to it. God is in the rain. And when I was in my worst moments of pain and I couldn't find a way out and there was no one to help me, I screamed for every name in existence, every creator I had known, and no one showed up. But my hope still remained because I held on to those few things, like God is in the rain. And in those moments, I couldn't find the rain, so I thought, it's okay, God didn't come, it's in the rain.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to end it there. Thank you to everyone who has stopped by to listen to this incredible share with our smart sisters, Brittany and Cassiopeia. I want to remind you all that all their information, including the book that Brittany talked about and their website and ways you can support their work, is going to be shared in the description. So make sure you stop by, have a look, browse around and see what floats your boat. Okay?
Thank you.
So until next time, I want to thank you both for coming, and I wish you all mountains, mountains, and mountains of success and love.
You as well.
Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.